Hey, peace to the family. Welcome to another episode of Blueprint for Black Power Study. I am Ikemba Ajore of We Charge Colonialism, head writer and researcher, coming at you with another examination of the text, Dr. Amos N. Wilson's text, The Blueprint for Black Power, an examination, discussion around what we have read. When I usually do these sessions, I keep them really short. But this is an ongoing study to get through this entire book and to come up and develop practical ways to implement the programs that Dr. Wilson has laid out for us in this particular study. So appreciate everybody that has tuned in the past and continuing to tune in to this study. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if this is your first time coming across this page. Make sure you like and share as well so other people can be able to join us in this examination and discussion. Reading Dr. Amos N. Wilson's The Blueprint for Black Power, what I do is I go through a paragraph or a few paragraphs, discuss those paragraphs, and then end it there. In the future, I want to maybe possibly make it more interactive with folks who continuously join this study, bring you guys up and have longer discussions that may, go beyond the 10 to 15 minutes that I usually do. But right now, I'm just going to keep it short, somewhere around 8 to 10 minutes. And so I'm going to get right into it. Again, another way that you can support We Charge Colonialism, you can go to our website, wechargecolonialism.org. We're a grassroots think tank. Your support helps us continue this work, and it will help us grow and have a larger reach. We Charge Colonialism. Our whole objective is to put out information, is to collect data, making sure that we put out information for Black, for African people to consume that gives you an alternative to the colonial media, gives you an alternative to the colonial education that many of us have been receiving for the last few centuries under the political and economic domination of Europeans. So with that being said, I want to get into it. Make sure you like and share. I'm starting from page 8 today. I'm on page 8 today. The second paragraph, I'm starting with the second paragraph. Those people, if you don't have the book by now, make sure you go out and get this book. It's The Blueprint for Black Power by Dr. Amos N. Wilson. That way that, you can study as I'm reading this, you can read along with me. And even after these sessions, you can dig deep into this book and come back and engage in these conversations with me. So hopefully you have the book. If not, make sure you get that. I'm gonna shout out DTR 360 Books. That's a place where you can get this book online. That's a comrade of mine out of Brooklyn. So you can support his online bookstore, DTR 360. So let me get into this. Right. So instances of defining power as power over include the definition of power as the possibility of imposing one's will upon the behavior of other persons, the ability to influence or control the actions of others, to get them to do what we want them to do and what they would otherwise not have done. And finally, as the capacity to affect the conduct of individuals through the real or threatened use of rewards and punishments. I'm gonna keep going because this is in this paragraph, I kind of been discussing power over and power to in the last few sessions. So make sure that you go back and check out the other studies. This is the 7th one that I've done. So check out some of the other studies so I don't, repeat some of the information again. And so going into the next paragraph, he says the person or group which possesses and applies power over another person or group is thereby enabled to structure and restrict the action range of the subordinate person or group and to limit the options available to him or it. Power over, as defined above, characterizes the primary power relationship between whites and blacks. As such, it essentially defines the character of white supremacy relative to black subordination. Power whether as power to or power over, manifests itself in a variety of forms or types. We shall briefly define certain types of forms of power and their relevance to white racist domination and exploitation of blacks, and to the necessity of blacks to develop the power to end such domination and exploitation. All right, so I read a few paragraphs, and like I said, I've really been discussing this power over and power to, what that looks like, how it shows up in relation to the Black or African community and the European and white community. And also, another thing when we talk about the Black and white community, you also have to look at these colors as positions as well, not necessarily just people. That's another thing I want to uplift very quick before I move on to forces power, is that black and white also in this society represents positions. The favorite position, Dr. Eldridge Hunter, he wrote a book on this. This is my mentor. He talked about the favorite position and the least favorite position. So the favorite position, the least favorite position within this European dominated society is the white position. And it's considered a position because you don't necessarily have to be, as we have seen throughout history, Anglo-Saxon to be white. You don't have to be German to be white, or from Europe to be white. There's people from that are Latin America who would check that white box, right? There's people from the Middle East that will check that white box, right? That favorite position. And so it represents a position, not necessarily a group of people within the society. So that's something that we have to keep in mind. But I'm gonna go on to the next paragraph, force as power. Now we're getting into the typologies of power. So he was opening it up before he got into the typologies, Dr. Wilson, that is, in regards to what power is, how power may show up, and how we should understand power. Now we're going into the different forms of power. So I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs and discuss that. So I'm on page 9, force is power. So Dr. Wilson says, power as force involves the exercise of biological and physical means to prevent another person or group from doing what he or it prefers to do, or to get something to happen to that person or group that he or it would prefer it did not. The force utilized may involve the infliction of bodily pain or injury, including the destruction of life itself and the frustration of basic biological needs. It may also involve the construction of human and physical obstacles to constrain or restrict the freedom and range of movement of another person or group. And so we're talking about force as power. And when we look at force, the preventing of people biologically, physically, preventing those people from being able to exercise or to act in a certain way, physical way or biological way, the people who are preventing them to do that, the individual or group that's preventing them to do that, can do that through the use of force, physical force, right? So they can do things by arresting you. This is using physical force, arrest you, put you in chains, shoot you, so the police and the military are examples of institutions that were established by the ruling class to implement force if necessary. And so force was used to enslave a people, to colonize a people, African people in particular, to bring a people from one continent to another continent. There was this use of force. But there's also an instrumental use of force that he gets into in the second paragraph that I'm going to uplift. So, just understanding that as well. So also, through centuries of using force, culture can be shaped by this force that's being used, the physical and instrumental use of force. So I'm going to add more onto that after I go into this last paragraph I'm going to read. So force may be utilized instrumentally rather than directly to achieve certain ends. The instrumental use of force may involve its use to inhibit or destroy another person's or group's ability to develop and mobilize his or its human and material resources, which might be used against the interests of the powers that be. The strategic and tactical purpose of instrumental force is to limit or eliminate the subordinate individual or group's capacity to act in certain ways. Instrumental force may be used to establish in the mind of the subordinate person or group the power holders of capability and willingness to use force as an instrument of punishment for non-compliant behavior on his or its part. It also may be used as a means of motivating the non-complying party to return to or to reestablish a pre-existing power relation. All right. So, I mean, let's look at the 60s. I can use examples for today too, but I want to look at like social movements though, and how force was used to prevent a group of people from being able to transform their conditions, right, or their position in society. If you look at the 60s, the civil rights movement and the Black Power movement that took place, there was force used to prevent those people from bringing or materializing certain objectives and goals that they had. And so during the Black Power movement, there was a call for nation building, nationalism. Black people were calling for a nation of their own. And there was this resistance to this revolution that was taking place in the 60s, because there was a revolution. There was revolutionary organizations that were organizing the Black community to develop Black controlled institutions, economic, political, education institutions, and some which were manifested or materialized during that time. But the overall movement was undermined by the federal government. The FBI, we all know, with the counterintelligence program, which was used to prevent these Black organizations such as the Black Panther Party to be able to organize the Black community, where you had Black people, Black leaders being assassinated and arrested. This is the use of force, physical, biological force, to prevent a people, individuals or groups, from achieving particular objectives. And this was done during slavery. But the instrumental use of force is something that we have to be very conscious of too. So Dr. Wilson, he's uplifting this. And what he's talking about in regards to the instrumental use of force is things like laws. The state can institute certain laws and use those laws as to prevent people from doing certain things. Let's use Jim Crow and Black codes are example. Jim Crow laws and Black codes is an example of force that was used, through laws to keep Black people from doing certain things. Now, if those laws are broken, then that physical force will be used, right? You will be arrested, you will be assassinated, hung, all of those things can happen. And so for instrumental force can be used and can be backed up. I'm sorry, instrumental use of force can be laws and be used through legal or extra legal means to keep a people from doing certain things. And this is what the white community has done. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the police or the military that's keeping it. It could be regular citizens, which has been done, has been seen or experienced within the United States and in other countries too. But just this, centering the U.S. right now, we have experienced people using extra legal means to keep Black people from doing certain things. So, this is instrumental use of force should be something that we're very conscious of, because it don't take the police don't have to, shoot a person down in the streets. They have the law to back them up to keep Black people from doing particular things. Because if you think about anything that Black African people do that is sort of against the grain, against society, is looked down upon or is shunned against the ruling class, against the status quo. When we do the freest that we are is when we do things that are not accepted by the status quo. When we start wearing afros, changing our names to African names, doing all of these things. This is us, trying to take back our sovereignty, trying to take back our freedom, our liberty. But the state, will put things in place, or, they will use the media and education to sort of undermine anything that we do that's a resistance to our oppression and exploitation. And this is done through force physically or the instrumental use of force. So I just wanted to uplift that. As I said, I like to keep these things short. But keep those things in mind, preventing us, if anything is used to prevent you from getting food, clothing, or shelter, or limiting your access to food, clothing, shelter, or limiting your ability to travel, to go. What's keeping you from going to, just like getting up one day and just like saying, you know what, I'm across the border and go to Canada. Like, you can do that, but there's laws that's put in place to prevent you from freely just traveling over there. And if there's certain things that you don't comply to, you're not going anywhere. So you have to comply to certain rules that are put in place. And don't get me wrong, like, laws, rules that's agreed upon by the people is a good thing, to have some sort of order within society. But when the laws and rules are one-sided, or when it's created by a group of people and you're not sitting at that table creating those laws, you know what I'm saying? Those laws that are put in place are used to prevent or to shape your behavior so that you can remain in a certain position or condition within society, then that's a problem. And that's what we have been experiencing within this European political and economic dominated world. So with that being said, what we have to do as African people, as Black people, is to begin to resist that force that's used to keep us in this state. And today, the thing is, the last thing I want to speak on is that the ruling class and the white community, who has been able to benefit at our expense, is really banking on us not resisting the status quo, resisting this system of oppression and exploitation. They're banking on us continuing to try to integrate and assimilate within this society, because that means, like, everything that they had stole from the Black community, African community, like, that means it's legitimate. It legitimizes the theft. It legitimizes the genocide that took place when we continuously try to integrate within the system. That's what they're banking on. They want us to accept it for what it is. Yeah, have a call for reparations. There's demands that we may have, but they're reformist demands. Like, we're looking for reforms. And yes, like, a call for reparations can be a reformist call if it doesn't come with certain things. Like, a revolutionary demand for reparations will overturn the system. So, like, there can be a revolutionary demand for reparations, but as long as, the reparations is something that we see in places like Illinois, where there's some checks, like, over a 10-year period, we're going to give you some resources for housing and so forth, things like that, they're fine with that, because that won't cripple the system. But a revolutionary demand for reparations will cripple the system. So, so it's important to understand that, it's this acceptance that they're banking on. But once we begin to say, hey, we're not accepting, this system anymore, we want to build a system of our own that's going to benefit us. Because at this point, there's things that we can do as a Black community that we can do that they won't necessarily undermine unless it becomes too powerful. But we can organize. Like, we can organize within our community, use resources, build our own schools. Like, nobody is stopping or preventing us from doing that today. That's something that we have to be very conscious and understanding of, is that we can do these things if we get organized. There is this history that is preventing us from doing it. It's the mindset that we have now, because we're not thinking nationalistic. Like, we're not thinking about nation building. Once we begin to think like that, then we can do it. Of course, like in the 60s and even prior to that with the Garvey movement, these movements were undermined. But today we can do that because of just the climate, just the climate of the world right now. They can't openly come out and just murder. They have done it, don't get me wrong, but if something like what happened with Fred Hampton, happened today, like, that would be a problem. That would be a problem. People would be in an uproar if that was to take place. But they will, continue to do things to try to undermine us from building a nation of our own. That's going to happen. But in the beginning stages, because there's people who are doing it. African People's Socialist Party got a Black Power blueprint that they're doing in St. Louis, buying up properties, buying up land, and building, housing. They're doing things in the St. Louis community that can be emulated in other places. So it's not that we can't do it. And so we have to think of how we can organize. I'm in Philadelphia. If we can organize 200,000 people that's on the same page, there's 200,000 Africans here. We organize 200,000 people that's on the same page and that's thinking about nation building, then we would have the organization and power to say, hey, we want to break away from the US government. We want a nation of our own. And we can, and that will be a struggle, with the United States. But if the United States, if they believe in democracy and liberty, then they have to show the world. They have to show the world that they respect a group of people that's demanding to be sovereign. And so we just have to have that vision. I just think that there's things that we can do as a people if we're organized. But right now, we have to overcome this use of force, the instrumental use of force, and the physical use of force. Because right now we're just being coerced to accept this particular system. So with that being said, I know I like went longer than expected, but I want to appreciate everybody for tuning in, viewing, being a part of this conversation. Make sure that you subscribe to the channel if you haven't subscribed to the channel as of yet. Make sure you like, make sure you share this podcast, and become a Patreon member. We have these discussions within our Telegram, with our membership. We charge colonialism membership as well as our Patreon members. So if you join, you become a Patreon member, you can join the discussions that we have. We delve deep. Right now, we're doing Dr. Amos N. Wilson's The Falsification of African Consciousness. So continue to build. Let me see what's going on in the chat real quick before I get off. Yeah, that's a fact. Folks are drinking the Kool-Aid and they're committed to integration, assimilating, especially in places like UK and Europe. Yeah, hey, that's the point I'm making. And that's like really what's keeping us. But what that comes through colonial education, colonial media, and it comes through this control over essential resources. Like we have to have, and it's not that we don't have the resources, but who's controlling those resources? There's because if you go to Africa, for example, we already know, like there's we have tons of resources, right? A variety of resources that are needed, from the coltan to the cobalt to the oil, the gold, you name it. Diamonds, all of these resources that are cocoa, right? All of these resources that the world is coveting, that they need to put on the market, that they need to take, manufacture and sell back as products to the rest of the world, so they can continue to build their wealth. But Africa is like the central, it's always been like the hunting ground for these colonizers in regards to resources. The very first one, major resource being labor, and African labor. And that's because of the sugar trade, this huge sugar trade. Once the sugar trade exploded, it was this need for African labor. So there's always been this history of that, but it's been the control of those resources. And so in order for Africans have looked at access to the system as a way to alleviate themselves from poverty. And this is because we haven't collectively, developed this collective consciousness that says, hey, in order for us to like really free ourselves from this dependency, is that we're going to have to fight. We're going to have to struggle. Nobody wants to go to war. Nobody wants to die, right? Self-preservation. That's the first law of nature, right? We want to survive. We want to live. But there has to be this mind. Malcolm X talked about it in regards to being free. If we really want to be free, we have to be willing to pay that ultimate price. And what's the ultimate price? The ultimate price is death. And it's not necessarily saying, hey, like being suicidal and saying, hey, I want to go out here, and become a martyr and be a martyr for our liberation, but it's that mindset that, hey, if I can't be free, then, I'm willing to die to be free, like understanding our condition. And what that does, the enemy, the colonizer, once he understands that you're willing to go all the way for your liberation, then they'll be ready to sit down because they don't want to die either. I mean, like, let's keep it real. Like, who wants to? So they human, they bleed just like we bleed. So there's going to be this willingness to sit down at the table. That's what happened in Vietnam when they was using the Vietnamese was losing millions of people died in the Vietnam War. Over 1 million people died in the Vietnam War. You look at the United States, tens of thousands of people died, but nowhere near the Vietnamese. But the Vietnamese was like, "Hey, we're gonna keep fighting till the last man is gone until we win." The U.S., they weren't willing to go all the way. They weren't willing to sacrifice more because there was marches. People were on the streets fighting to stop the war. Nobody wanted to go to that war and die. So there was a compromise, and so this is mutually assured destruction. Mad. Exactly. Like this is something, but we haven't collectively developed this mindset of we're willing to go all the way and pay that ultimate price where these colonizers are going to be like, hey, it's time to like sit down and negotiate, with these folks. Because they can't wipe us all out. Not in its well, let me not say that because the mentality of these folks, they take the whole planet with them. But I think if we can change the mindset of enough of them where they're fighting against their own, that's the one thing that they keeps them strong, is that they're not as divided as the Africans are in the diaspora and on the continent. They're even though they may not like each other or get along, they develop institutions that forces them to work together. Economic, whether it's the European Union, NATO, like with these institutions, there's rules and regulations where they're constantly sitting down and have to work together, and that helps them secure their status within this, or their position within this world. How a small ass country like Denmark, Switzerland, Sweden, like all of these little ass European countries are able to have so much wealth and are able to dominate the rest of the globe, right? Which one of these countries, they don't even have an army? I think Switzerland, is it, or Sweden? One of these countries don't even have an army, and why is that? Because they have these other European powers that is willing to go to war if someone was to attack one. You attack all of them, right? So but that's we have a ways to go. We don't have this touch one, touch all mentality, which is what we have to develop. We have to touch one of us, you touch all of us. You touch one African, one black person in this world, you attack one African country in this world, you attack all of us, right? And so that's how we have to start thinking. Let me look at it. I guess like I am about to jump off though. I gotta run out. Yeah, it's a brother from Egypt who experienced this racial reassignment. Yeah. Yo, I want to appreciate y'all though. It's Sunday. I wanted to get on here, do this study. I'll probably be back on. Let me see if I can get one in tomorrow or Tuesday. But continue to view, and make sure you're studying outside of this Blueprint for Black Power. Make sure you get a copy if you don't have it. And y'all enjoy the rest of y'all day. Also want to uplift in the United States. Today is Umoja Karamu. I want to say Furaha Umoja Karamu. That means Happy Unity Feast. It is a Black holiday. It was created in 1971. And of course, like this is the culture, Black culture. This is a part of our resistance. It was created in 1971. It's the fourth Sunday in November. It was created so we have an alternative to Thanksgiving. We don't have to celebrate these European holidays. We got our own. All right. We have our own. We just have to study. And those who know must educate and make others aware. And we can't just be talking about the holidays. We have to actually implement and practice these things. So we have Kwanzaa, we have Umoja Karamu, we have African Liberation Day, we have days of our own, Juneteenth. And so let's learn about all of those so we don't have to accept what the colonizer has forced upon us and given us. So with that being said, everybody enjoy your day. Appreciate y'all. And I'm going to sign out, man. Appreciate y'all. Peace.